So he made a whip out of cords and drove them all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. I think you all know this story. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. Now, you know, it may seem a bit strange at first to talk about anger on World Communion Sunday. After all, this is a day when we are supposed to be seeing past our many differences, both in theology and in nationality. Today, in fact, we are trying to come together as one great church, one great people, symbolically, at least. But in another way, it makes all the sense in the world, because on a day of unity like today, it is worth taking a moment to think about what divides us. And anger, particularly when it is misdirected at superficial differences in individuals and groups, anger is a powerful source of division. Anger is a powerful force for division. Now, anger is also a sometimes necessary emotion, isn't it? We can't survive as human beings just repressing our anger all the time. Because anger can bring people together for good. But in the hands of the powerful, it can be a tool to hide our shared humanity and make us easy to control. After all, each of us knows some variation of LBJ's observation that if you give one group of people some other group of people to look down on, that first group will empty their pockets for you. I assume you've heard that. Anyone? Look it up. There's many, he got into it. But let's start at the beginning and think about one way that anger works. In our responsive reading, the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh tells us about those stormy, hidden currents underneath the placid lake of our outward personality. And how sometimes our anger just comes onto us, even though we aren't really sure why. When we get tired, we get angry. When we feel slighted, we get angry. There are numerous triggers to our rage, and when this happens, we are rarely mad at the hidden storm inside our hearts and minds, because that would be way too much work to do to fix that. Instead, we rage at the trigger or at the person or thing that pointed it out. Now, we want our anger to be like that of Jesus, cleansing the temple, which is to say, righteous anger, directed from our deep convictions, our faith, our love. But so much of the time, when we're angry, we are just being ridiculous. We are just being ridiculous. I mean, I don't want to get into the details. My wife is here. But I am a 54-year-old man, and I still have been known to storm off and slam a door, occasionally. And if you asked me in that moment why I am angry, I would tell you that it had to do with things like whose turn it was to do the dishes or to walk the dog, or someone playing their music too loud on a hiking trail. Frankly, when I say that, I get mad. But that's not the reason, really. The true reason lies somewhere in those hidden currents of my human soul. Now, outside of our short responsive reading today, Thich Nhat Hanh dwells a bit on what lies beneath, calling those storms under the surface an inherited block of suffering. an inherited block of suffering. From time to time, he tells us that block of suffering will emerge. So he says, we begin to have problems, and we don't know what our real problem or what our real suffering is. We don't know what our real problem or our real actual suffering is. There is anger in each of us. There are demons we have not yet wrestled beneath that placid lake that we would present to the world. And that is what makes us vulnerable to exploitation. There are demons we have not wrestled beneath our placid lake. And that is what makes us vulnerable to exploitation. Because we don't understand it all, and we are prone to overreact when confronted by things we don't understand. Again, maybe it's just me, but I doubt it. So much of what we are outwardly mad at doesn't reach that temple cleansing level. But inwardly, at the same time, we are tapping into a deep well of pain. Now, this pain, some of it we have inherited from our family, some from our culture, some from simple biology, some from the economy or from violence, both institutional and personal. There are many sources of anger, and I am sure I missed some. And as we move through the world, we aren't always able to cleanse our inner temple, the temple of our hearts and souls, as well as we wish we could. Right? Partly, this is because we are so busy. We are so busy, too busy to look inward as much as we would like. We are kept too busy, in fact. And partly, too, it is because we are already too angry. We are kept too angry, even perpetually angry, by that system that takes advantage of our deep well, takes advantage of our block of suffering for their own purposes. In fact, in many cases, and it's funny to think about this, not funny, haha, strange. In many cases, our rage is curated for us. It is curated rage. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I said I would come back to doom scrolling, and here we are. How many of you have Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok? All right. Me too, you know that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to make those cute videos. Those of us with Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, and there are others, we know how quickly our feeds can turn to, let's call them invitations to be angry. And each time we come to terms with one infraction, one trigger, another one cruises in to take its place, drawing us into a dark hole of depression, of lamentation, of reactivity. But those of you who stay off these things, and good for you, you're not entirely safe either. Because all media tries to replicate this experience, tries to generate a quick, shallow emotion. Not just the socials. To generate this feeling, all the media does this, and then the press secretaries of every politician and every corporation make sure it goes on. Just when we think we might find a way through to some sort of peace, the universal algorithm goes off again, asking, have you thought of this problem? This trigger? This reason to live in rage? In Ephesians, we are told not to stay angry all day. You can see that quote on the front of your bulletin. And this is why. Anger, chronic anger, toxic anger clouds our minds, making all sorts of progress that much more difficult. Thich Nhat Hanh says the solution to controlling our anger is, in his words, to go home to ourselves. To go home to ourselves and try to recognize our suffering and embrace it. But in a world controlled by captains and princes, we never manage to plumb the depths underneath that placid lake. We never manage to come to terms with all the unresolved parts of the self. And our angry society also fails to do the same thing, thereby keeping all those negative isms and phobias alive in our business and in our political discourse. But there is hope. Thankfully, there is another form of anger, of constructive anger. And of course, I mentioned it earlier. And we started with that little quote from the cleansing of the temple. This anger can help us go home to ourselves because it comes from a place of divine and universal love. And the origins of this anger are not from the unexamined block of suffering inside. Instead, it comes from the suffering we actually recognize within us that enables us to reach out to other people in empathy and love, to the suffering that we see in the world. The Reverend Michelle Torgan started us off today in our opening words by saying, "Do not despair at the acts of the wicked. Trust in God. Scatter the seeds of justice." Do not despair at the acts of the wicked. Trust in God. Scatter the seeds of justice. Righteous anger, true righteous anger, tries to do just that. Because there is plenty in this world to be righteously mad about. And this anger, clear-headed and combined with action, brings with it not a debilitating spiral where so many people would like us to live, but instead hope for the future and love for everyone else. Jesus, in our reading today, already knew a great deal about suffering. He had done the work, so to speak. And his anger in that moment at the temple was about justice. It was about rebalancing the inner and the outer, about telling the world that our faith has little patience for the people and institutions that take advantage of human weakness. And we know that feeling he is talking about. We've been there. We know that feeling. When we are at our best, we have tapped into it. And we know its healing power. Now, there's that quote on the cover of your order of service, but there is also a picture. It's a picture I took at the No Kings rally this past summer. And a lot of you were there. I didn't know you all then, so I hope I wasn't rude. And while it was anger that brought us together on that day, anger at the state of the world, at injustice, at the willful division of people in our country, there was joy there too. You'll remember that too. There was joy. Because we were happy to be together. We were happy to get a chance to speak out, to help each other direct our anger at its actual cause, and then to be heard and seen. You see, there are times when anger is necessary. Anger at the injustice of the world, and also anger at injustices done to us. So now we come back to this day, World Communion Sunday. A day about unity, a day of joy and connection, recognizing that it is also a day of justice, when we see our differences, mourn them, and work to overcome them. So let's take a moment in silence before communion to discern where our anger is righteous and where it is a hindrance to clarity in our walk of faith, and to consider what is dividing us, as well as what brings us together at this time.